In the heart of ancient Jerusalem stood a magnificent palace, its marble floors gleaming in the warm sunlight that poured through tall, arched windows. The grand halls echoed with the footsteps of courtiers and the whispers of important matters. At the center of this opulent world sat King Solomon, a Middle Eastern man with light tan skin and short, dark hair that curled slightly at the edges. His royal robes, adorned with intricate gold embroidery, draped elegantly around his shoulders as he gazed thoughtfully at the scene before him. Solomon had only recently ascended to the throne, following in the footsteps of his father, the great King David. The weight of his new responsibilities pressed heavily upon him, and he often found himself awake late into the night, pondering the challenges that lay ahead. On this particular evening, as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Solomon knelt in his private chambers, his heart filled with a deep longing for guidance. "O Lord," he prayed, his voice barely above a whisper, "I am but a young man, and I do not know how to carry out my duties. Give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong." The sincerity of his words hung in the air, and for a moment, all was still. Then, as if in answer to his plea, a sense of peace washed over him, and he rose from his knees with renewed purpose. The next morning, as Solomon sat upon his ornate throne, the bustling courtroom fell silent. Two women, their faces etched with worry and determination, approached the king. The first woman, tall and slender with long, dark hair and olive skin, cradled a sleeping infant in her arms. The second, shorter and stockier with curly brown hair, stood empty-handed, her eyes darting nervously between the baby and the king. "My lord," began the first woman, her voice trembling slightly, "this woman and I live in the same house. I had a baby while she was there with me. 3 days after my child was born, she also had a baby. We were alone, there was no one in the house but the two of us." The woman paused, taking a deep breath before continuing her tale. "During the night, this woman's son died because she lay on him. So she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from my side while I, your servant, was asleep. She put him by her breast and put her dead son by my breast." The woman's eyes filled with tears as she clutched the baby closer to her chest. "When I got up in the morning to nurse my son, I saw he was dead. But when I looked at him closely in the morning light, I saw that it wasn't the son I had born." The second woman interjected, her voice rising in anger, "No. The living one is my son, the dead one is yours." The first woman shouted back, "No. The dead one is yours, the living one is mine." Their voices echoed through the grand hall, causing the baby to stir and whimper. Solomon watched the scene unfold, his dark eyes thoughtful as he considered the dilemma before him. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the onlookers speculated about how the young king would resolve this seemingly impossible situation. Solomon raised his hand, and a hush fell over the crowd. His voice, calm and authoritative, rang out clearly, "Bring me a sword." The request caught everyone off guard, and a collective gasp rippled through the room. A guard quickly appeared, carrying a gleaming sword with an ornate hilt. He presented it to the king with a deep bow. Solomon took the weapon, its weight familiar in his hand from his training as a young prince. He turned to face the two women, who now stood frozen in anticipation and fear. "Cut the living child in two," Solomon commanded, his face impassive, "and give half to one and half to the other." The crowd gasped in horror, unable to believe what they were hearing. The guard hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached for the child. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut with the very sword that threatened the innocent life. Suddenly, the woman whose son was alive was overcome with love for her child. She cried out to the king, her voice filled with desperation, "Please, my lord, give her the living baby. Don't kill him." Her eyes were wide with fear, and her whole body shook as she pleaded for the life of her son. The other woman, however, remained eerily calm, her face a mask of indifference. "Neither I nor you shall have him," the second woman said coldly, "Cut him in two." Her words sent a chill through the courtroom, and many turned away, unable to bear the thought of what might happen next. Solomon's eyes narrowed as he observed the reactions of both women, his mind working quickly to discern the truth. With a slight nod, Solomon lowered the sword and turned to the guard. "Give the living baby to the first woman," he declared, his voice firm and resolute. "Do not kill him, she is his mother." The guard immediately obeyed, gently placing the child in the arms of the weeping woman. She clutched her son to her chest, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. The second woman stood in stunned silence, her deception exposed. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and amazed murmurs. They had witnessed not just the resolution of a dispute, but a display of wisdom beyond their imagining. Solomon's gaze swept across the room, taking in the reactions of his subjects. "This is how we know the true mother," Solomon explained, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "A mother's love is so great that she would rather give up her child than see him harmed." The woman who was willing to see the baby divided could not possibly be the real mother. The people nodded in understanding, marveling at the young king's insight. As the true mother cradled her baby, showering him with kisses and whispered words of love, the other woman was led away by the guards. Solomon watched them go, a mixture of sadness and determination in his eyes. He knew that justice had been served, but he also recognized the pain and desperation that had driven the second woman to such deceit. Word of Solomon's judgment spread quickly throughout the kingdom. People spoke in hushed tones of the young king's wisdom, and how he had seen through the lies to find the truth. Many who had doubted the ability of such a young ruler now found their faith in him growing stronger with each passing day. In the days that followed, Solomon reflected on the events that had transpired. He realized that the wisdom he had prayed for had indeed been granted to him. But with this gift came great responsibility. He vowed to use his discernment not just to settle disputes, but to guide his people toward a future of peace and prosperity. As the sun set on another day in Jerusalem, Solomon stood at the window of his chambers, looking out over the city he now ruled. The golden light bathed the buildings in a warm glow, and he could hear the distant sounds of life in the streets below. He thought about the challenges that lay ahead and the many decisions he would have to make. With a deep breath, Solomon turned from the window and walked to a small table where a scroll lay open. He picked up a quill and began to write, recording the events of the day and the lessons he had learned. He knew that his wisdom, if shared, could benefit not just his own people, but generations to come. As the ink flowed across the parchment, Solomon felt a sense of purpose and clarity. He understood now that true wisdom was not just about knowing the right answers, but about asking the right questions and seeing beyond the surface of things. With this knowledge, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, guided by the wisdom he had been granted and the love he had for his people.